Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to David Nemec's Baseball History and Trivia. Okay, today, David, I, and Aunt Kahanowitz are going to discuss the seasons from 1955 through 1957. 1957 marking the end of an era when the Dodgers and Giants vacated New York to move out to California. And we think that would be a proper ending point today. So I just want to welcome both of you, and let's get started.
Glad to be with both of you again.
Same here.
Okay. In 1955, basically for a lot of fans here, everything righted itself up until the World Series. The Yankees bounced back from 1954 and won the pennant in the American League, and the Dodgers ran away with the pennant in the National League. They won 20 out of their first 22 games that season. And I think they would wind up beating Milwaukee out by 13 and a half games. The Giants, and what would be Leo DeRosa's last year of managing them, finished a poor third. And Mays was still Mays, but a lot of the others had started to fall off. The Dodgers still basically had their core, what was commonly known as the Boys of Summer, and they put together, as I said, 20 out of 22 first game wins, and they opened up a big lead, and they kept it throughout the season. So the National League didn't have very much suspense. The Yankees, on the other hand, in the American League had suspense because they beat the perennial contenders during that early part of that decade, the Cleveland Indians, who wound up second. And if I remember correctly, David, you can confirm this, that one of the Indians' big problems is they lost 13 out of the 22 games to the Washington Senators.
That was a big win, and also they lost Vic Wirtz for a good part of the season.
Yeah.
And they with polio, I believe.
Yeah, it was non-paralytic polio. Yeah.
Yeah, non-paralytic polio, but nevertheless felled them for the remainder of the season. They had a call on Ferris Fain, with very little left to fill in at first base, and the rest of their hitters also fell off dramatically. Bobby Avila went from winning the batting crown to hitting .272, and Rosen, who had been a perennial All-Star and looked like a future Hall of Famer in '53, dropped all the way to .244. Only scored 61 runs and only drove in 81. And that was, Rosen had one more season left. And we talked about this last week, that finger injury that he never really recovered from in '54 took its toll, and he just was never the same ball player again. So the Tribe, even though they picked up Ralph Kiner from the National League, and he still had a little bit left, had 18 home runs. Not much to help in left field, however. They just couldn't make it. They had the pitching once again. They acquired a new arm, a phenomenal new arm, in rookie Herb Score, who won 16 games, compiled well over 200 strikeouts, and looked like he was on his way to a future Hall of Fame. In fact, future Hall of Famer, when he saw Score pitch for the first time, Hal Newhouser said, "I would trade my past in a minute for his future." And as we'll discuss shortly, Score's future was anything but propitious.
The Yankees that year finally broke their ban on black players. They brought Elson Howard up, and he contributed with a solid rookie season to the Yankees. The Yankees had sent Gene Woodling to the Orioles as part of the trade after 1954 when they got Bob Turley and Don Larson, and so they and Irv Noren, who was the regular left fielder for a while until Howard basically displaced him, went back to hitting 260. He had a monster year in 1954. He had 319, but he never approached that again. And by the end of the 1956 season, he would find himself where old Yankee flops went in those years, the Kansas City A's. And that was the first year of the A's in Kansas City. And the A's had moved there from Philadelphia after this season. And they would play 13 years in Kansas City and have 13 straight losing seasons there. Another thing was that the Bob Feller also was, for the Indians was at the end of the line. The Yankees, Raleigh Reynolds had retired after 1954. Vic Raschi, who had been sold to the Cardinals after before 1954, who would finish up with the A's that year, and Eddie Lopat, who would be sent to Baltimore on waivers in mid-1955. They were all gone. And the Yankees resurrected Tommy Byrne, who had been a starter from 1949 through 1951, who did a couple of years in the minors. And they brought him back, and he won control out there and became a big contributor to the Yankees' the success that year. And David, would you like to discuss after that season? The Indians and White Sox made a strange trade. The Indians sent Larry Doby, who still had something left.
He did.
The White Sox
he had a pretty good year.
And Jim Busby, and of course the White Sox were willing to unload Carrasquel because they had Luis Aparicio waiting in the wings.
And Carrasquel really was, even though his legs were already gone, he was still fairly young. And Busby, his arm was gone. So Busby came to Cleveland to play center field, and he had good range, still had good range, and could hit a bit, but not a lot. But Busby was having to throw most of his stuff into the infield underhand. I can still recall him making a catch in deep center field and skipping the ball on about 4 bounces into second base. And then the next time he caught a ball in center field, he wheeled and threw it underhand. That trade really killed Cleveland after the 55 season. They weren't a contender again until 59, even though they had pretty good pitching and some good ball players like Wirtz. It was a bad trade.
And the White Sox still, finished third. They also couldn't get it along. Even they had Billy Pierce and Nellie Fox and Lee Minoso. Pierce that year became the only pitcher in baseball who had enough innings to qualify for a season who had an ERA of under 2. He had a 1.97 ERA on 15 and 10, which gives you an indication of their offensive prowess. Dan, you want to add anything?
Oh, there's plenty of stuff to add. One of the things that went on was that probably the greatest shortstop of the game died, Honus Wagner. He died at the age of 81 on December 6th that year. The 55 season debuted rookie talents, Sandy Koufax, Brooks Robinson, Roberto Clemente, and Harlan Killebrew. All these guys would end up in the Hall of Fame. Speaking of Doby committed his first error while playing the outfield, and this ended his streak of 167 games without an error. And again, we speak about our good old friend Ted Williams. Williams finished the season with a 356 average and 71 walks, which was well ahead of the batting champion that year, Al Kaline from Detroit.
Kaline was in his second full season.
Yeah, and due to the high amount of walks, Ted Williams did not have enough at-bats to win the batting championship.
Oh, he only played 98 games that year. He missed a good portion of the early part of that season. And, two guys in the National League, two second-year men, basically, emerged as stars. One was named Ernie Banks, and the other was named Henry Aaron.
That's right.
Banks, I believe, hit 44 home runs that year for the Cubs, and Aaron hit 314 and really emerged as a star that would be around for quite a number of years.
And Willie Mays became the seventh player ever to hit 50 home runs, joining the likes of Babe Ruth, Ralph Kiner, Jimmy Fox, Hank Greenberg.
He beat out Ted Kluszewski, who had 47 that season.
Yeah, big year.
Yeah.
1955. And, of course, Brooklyn won the World Series.
Yeah, then we got to the World Series, which still is painful for me.
Painful for me, and I wasn't even born yet.
Yeah. Well, I was 12 years old, and, we'll get to this in a few minutes. The series opened in Yankee Stadium, and the Yankees, behind Whitey Ford and Tommy Byrne, won the first two games. Of course, the most notable play in the first game was the Jackie Robinson steal of home, when he stole home, and Yogi Berra, till his dying day, insisted that Robinson was out. In fact, Yogi went ballistic on that call. If anybody's seen films of that, you see Yogi jumping up and down like crazy. And a number of years ago, we went to a SABR meeting out in the Yogi Museum in Montclair, and Dale Berra was the featured speaker. And I asked Dale if Yogi had ever gotten as mad as he did that play. And he said only when we talked back to our mother. And so if Yogi could get crazy like that, it had to be a very, very close play. And the batter, number 12, was a backup first baseman by the name of Frank Keller, who nobody would remember for anything except the fact that he was the hitter when Robinson stole home. Joe Collins, the Yankee first baseman, hit 2 home runs in that game. So the series shifted to Ebbets Field, and the Dodgers' Yankee pitching was not very good at that point, and Turley was beaten, and the Dodgers won the next 3 games fairly easily. And they took a 3-2 lead, and the scene shifted back to Yankee Stadium. And in the 6th game, the Dodgers started a right-hander named Carl Spooner, who was a sensation at the end of 1954, and had won 8 games. Spooner lasted a third of an inning, gave up 5 home runs, and that was the last time he ever pitched in a major league game. His arm was sore, and that was it for him. So the series was tied 3-up. And the 7th game in Yankee Stadium was between Tommy Byrne of the Yankees and Johnny Padres of the Dodgers. Padres, who had been a lackluster 9-10 in the regular season, had beaten the Yankees in the 3rd game, pitching a complete game. And Padres had a change-up working, and they beat the Yankees 2-0 in the game. The game was decided by basically the Yankees had 2 men on in the 7th inning, and Yogi Berra hit a ball to left field that was slicing away from Dodger left fielder Sandy Ambrose, who made a sensational catch and doubled Gil McDougall off first base, and that was the end of it. One of the things that that series, Mantle only played in 3 games. He had knee problems that kept him out of 4 of the games of the World Series. In fact, when they had the Sabre Convention in Arlington, Texas in 1994, they came up with a kinescope of Game 1. And batting third for the Yankees was Irv Noren. And Irv Noren had never batted third in his life, anybody. And he was a last second replacement for Mantle, who couldn't go that day. And Hank Bauer also missed a couple of games. The Yankees were really without two of their major hitters for a good portion of that series. Not taking anything away from the Dodgers. The Dodgers finally got one, and Pee Wee Reese, who had played in 5 losing series against the Yankees before that, was ecstatic. Brooklyn went ballistic that night. And they celebrated to the wee hours, and that little did they know that 2 years later everything would be all over. Personal note, I was 12 years old at that point, and I ran home from school to catch the bottom of the 9th inning. And at 12 years old, the Yankees were, to lose a World Series was meant the sun sat in the east. The sun sat in the west, excuse me. And I remember sitting on the sofa in the living room watching the end of that game and pounding the sofa saying, "This is impossible. This can't be true." Well, I know.
There were people in New York twice your age who were saying the same thing.
Yeah, I pay a lot of dimes and quarters the next day. At the school, I pay out the little 10-cent and 25-cent bets I made with some other kids. Back in those days in New York, where I grew up in Queens, everybody was either from the Bronx or from Brooklyn. So either a Dodger fan or a Yankee fan, and very, very few Giant fans out there in those days.
Yeah.
We used to call Giant fans as being chicken because they wouldn't take sides. But the Dodgers wound up winning that series. Yogi Berra won as MVP for the third time. And the Roy Campanella, who had a bounce-back series, took the MVP in the National League. And I believe that that Duke Snider, who lost the MVP to Campanella by 1 point, should have won the MVP for that season for them. Any opinion on that, anybody?
Well, I'd like to say a word about Carl Spooner.
Okay.
And Spooner came up toward the end of '54 with the Dodgers. He
Hello?
Debut in his first 2 games, I think, of any pitcher ever. He pitched two complete game shutouts, in which he fanned a total of 27 batters, walked 6, allowed only 7 hits, which gave him a whip of .65 for the year. And huge things were expected of him in '55. And I think if I'm not mistaken, that even before they broke spring training, the Dodgers were aware that Spooner was having arm trouble, and he was spotty off and on all season with arm trouble, and he only pitched, I believe, he pitched less than 100 innings all told, not including his World Series appearance. And as Al said, unfortunately, the World Series was his coda. He never came back from arm trouble, never rebounded, and he's a forgotten name today. But and people going into spring training in 1955, particularly from Brooklyn, were predicting great things from him, and just unfortunately never happened.
Oh yeah, because excuse me, the year before in 1953. Alan Worthington had came up for the Giants and pitched 2 consecutive shutouts, and he basically achieved some success later on as a reliever. But he was never a good starter after that. And of course, in those days, if a pitcher came down with arm trouble, they had no Tommy John surgery or none of the other procedures that they have now to get the pitchers back out there. And pitchers would a lot of them would come down with sore arms after 1 or 2 years, and they'd hang around because of what they had done earlier for a year or two.
Yeah.
But they were basically done.
And the term rotator cuff wasn't even in parlance as yet. It was just
No.
a sore arm or sore wing, or
Yeah.
sometimes it was a bum elbow, or and Dick Fowler had bursitis, and he was a rare case where they actually could attribute it to a specific ailment rather than just a very generalized term, sore arm.
Well, the Yankees, we'll see, had a whole string of pitchers, basically through 1964, that would have 1 year or 2 years, and their arms would get hurt, and that would be the end of it. For the next 10 years, from 55 through 64, basically Whitey Ford would be the only consistent pitcher on the team. They have guys like, we'll get into this in 1956, because they had two of them that season who one would never repeat, and the other would have one more before their arms went, and they would be shipped to the A's.
Yeah.
And in 1956, they repeated. This was basically the last hurrah for the boys of summer. The Brooklyn Dodgers and the Yankees would have a fairly easy pennant race. They'd win, I think, by 8 games over the Indians, who were still good enough to finish second. And this was Mickey Mantle's year. Mickey Mantle finally lived up to his potential and would go on to win the Triple Crown in the American League with 353 average, 52 home runs, and 130 RBIs. He was leading slugging and total bases and OBS, because on base percentage and on base plus slugging, runs scored. It was a really, really tremendous year. And Yogi Berra would have his last really big season, because he would get worn down from catching all the time. And behind Whitey Ford that season, they had two pitchers, Johnny Cooks, who would win 18 games and never see a year close to that in the remainder of his career, and a pitcher totally coming out of nowhere named Tom Sturtevant, who won 16 games and would win 16 the following year, and then hurt his arm and would hang around for a number of years with very limited effectiveness. So also in the American League that year, the Indians finished second, and they had 3 20-game winners. Bob Lemon, Early Wynn, and Herb Score all won 20 games for that team.
And their downfall was they probably had the weakest hitting of any decent team in the majors.
Rosen had his last season.
Yeah. And
Avila fell off to 224.
And Al Smith pretty much held the lineup together with a 274 average. And Rocky Calavito was starting to come on, starting to show some potential, but still wasn't an everyday player. George Strickland fell, no longer was in the regular lineup. Carrasquel was a disappointment at short, as we've already said. Busby was had a miserable year all around. Gene Woodling came to Cleveland from Baltimore, had put together a pretty good season, and he had another season or two left in him. One of the few mistakes the Yankees made was shipping Woodling before.
I was very upset when they made that trade. Woodling had his worst year with the Yankees in 1954, and Irv Noren had a career year, so they kept Noren. And as I said earlier, he reverted to his 260 hitting, and by 1956, he was shipped to the Kansas City A's.
Yeah, Woodling still had 3 or 4 of these pretty good seasons left in him.
Yeah, the other 20-game winners in the Mantle only won the RBI title by 2. Al Kaline had driven 128 runs, and Detroit, between Kaline, Harvey Keene, and Ray Boone, and the pitchers Billy Heft and Frank Larry, who would win 20 games apiece, finally made some noise. For the first time since 1950, they faded at the end to come and finish in 5th place. But they were 10 games over 500. This was the last team that Bucky Harris managed.
Yeah.
And after a very, very lengthy career in the major leagues as a manager. And the Red Sox had Ted Williams, who were 345. But again, it wasn't quite enough to beat Mickey Mantle out. And Jackie Jensen, and they finished 4th. And the White Sox, again, with Billy Pierce, who was a 20-game winner, Nellie Fox, Minnie Minoso, and Larry Doby, who did drive 100 runs for them that year, came in 2nd. And the trailers were the usual: the Baltimore Orioles, the Kansas City A's, and the Washington Senators. The National League was a totally different story. The Dodgers won on the last weekend of the season. They beat the Milwaukee Braves out by 1 game, and the Cincinnati Reds, who put together a powerhouse of sluggers with Ted Wazowski, Wally Post, Gus Bell, and a rookie outfielder by the name of Frank Robinson, who turned out to be a fairly decent ball player. And what kept them from winning was their mediocre pitching. They had a pitcher named Brooks Lawrence who won 19 games, but behind him the pitching was very, very weak. The Dodgers were paced by Don Newcomb, who during the regular season won 27 games, lost 7, and would be the winner of the first Cy Young Award, which through 1967 would only be awarded to the one pitcher in the major leagues. And Newcomb was the first winner of that. The Giants had faded to 6th place. The Giants had faded to 6th place, and basically all they had that year were Willie Mays and pitcher Johnny Antonelli, who would win 20 games. Robin Roberts finally had his overwork caught up to him, and he had a very bad year when he won 19 and lost 18 with a very high ERA. And, the 2 old reliables on the Braves, Warren Spahn and Lou Burdette, would have 20-game winners. The bank champion in the National League would be Henry Aaron. And between Aaron and Matthews and Joe Adcock, they put together a formidable team, and their one weakness on the field was at second base with a former Pirate named Danny O'Connell, who got progressively worse as a hitter. And they wound up, Bob Buell, the Braves' third starter, beat the Dodgers 8 times in that season, which is something that nobody will ever come close again because of the way the schedule is.
That is a phenomenal feat that really has gotten almost no credit over the years, and that's a shame because I remember that and how it really jumped off the page.
Warren Spahn's one weakness as a pitcher was he couldn't pitch in Ebbets Field. He had a horrible record against the Dodgers during the time they were in Ebbets Field. So Buell basically took that slack up. And the rest of the league, Stan Musial was still plodding along, hitting way over 300, but not hitting enough to win the batting title. So the Dodgers, everything set up another Dodger-Yankee World Series. Ian, you have anything to add to that?
The Reds weren't called the Reds at the time. In 1953, they changed their name.
The Redwoods. That was on the baseball cards. Yeah.
Yeah, because of the change in political. And you gentlemen know more than this of me. I mean, I only studied about McCarthy later in the 80s when I was in high school, but the whole communist scare and the threat of nuclear war made the Reds change their name. And in fact,
that's a very good point because that a lot was made of that at the time too.
Yeah, the Topps cards from during that period would put the team down on as the Cincinnati Redlegs.
And that's because they were originally called the Cincinnati Red Stockings.
Yeah.
And now the Red Legs. Now, again, they changed around with the logo. Very interesting about Cincinnati if you look into their history during this time period. They did finish a very good season behind Milwaukee and the Dodgers, and we'll talk about the Reds because I speak to Jenny Paul, who was the daughter of Gabe Paul, who pretty much ran the team at the time in the 1950s, and so I have some good stories to tell about the Reds when we get to it at another time. But in '56, I mean, there's so much more. I mean, that happened. Mel Parnell had a no-hitter.
Yeah.
You know, on July 17th. Ted Williams, here we go again, 400th career home run. Nellie Fox, he went 7 for 7 at the plate.
Not in that game. Well, that'd be a doubleheader because Randy Stanton's the only one in the 20th century that did that.
Yeah, I think it was a double.
Yeah.
Then they had Bob Felladay in Cleveland. And can you believe in just literally 8 years? 8 years. Because I just got done with a show on Bob Lemon today with Lou Friedman and the summer to remember about the 48 Indians. Bob Lemon wins his 200th career victory in 1956. So it is a banner year when you overall look at what's going on.
Well, one of the things about Bob Lemon, if you throw out early wins, early years with the Washington Senators, and you compare win from 1950 on, through the rest of his career, he and Lemon have very, very similar numbers.
Yeah. Although, Win lasted into Lemon was pretty much finished after.
Yeah, 57 was, he fell off at 57. That was basically the end for him.
Yeah. But Win went on into, 59, he was a terrific pitcher, and then 60, and then he ended up having to win his 300th game after coming back to Cleveland when the White Sox released him.
Yeah. Somebody in one of the sites I'm on posted a picture of Win scoring Lemon late 1956, and Win was actually smiling. A couple of people commented on that. That's the first picture they have sort of him smiling.
Yeah, but Feller did not go out in a blaze of glory. People desperately were hoping as late as 1953, 54 that Feller would hang around long enough to win 300 games, make up for all the years he missed during World War II. But after a pretty good year in 54, he really fell off the table in 55. And in 56, even though he hung around for all the season, he ended up 0-4. It was a shame almost to see him to go out and pitch. He just didn't have it anymore.
Yeah, well, the two others, Hall of Famers hung it up after that season. Well, the first one was Jackie Robinson. And Jackie Robinson, age finally caught up with him. He was 37 during that season. He had a mediocre year, and he did not get along with Walter O'Malley or Walter Olson because Jackie Robinson was a Branch Rickey man, and O'Malley, one of the things he tried to do when he took over the Dodgers was get rid of every reminder of Branch Rickey. So after the 1956 season, they sold Jackie Robinson to the Giants for $30,000, and Dick Littlefield, who was a pitcher we'll get into sometime down the road, who God made a specialty in studying because of his the number of times he was traded during his 9-year career in the major leagues. And Robinson decided to take a job with as vice president of a coffee manufacturer called Chock full of Nuts, and he retired rather than go to the Giants.
He also had diabetes, Jim.
Yeah, that would eventually kill him. Yeah.
And unfortunately, I have the same disease since I left law school 20 years ago. I'm going to be.
Yeah, I got a close friend of mine that's dealing with that. Known for
I'm
over 60 years.
I'm going to be 47 on Sunday, and I had to retire at 45. My body just couldn't do it. So whenever I hear about Robinson's decline, and I speak to Ronnie Rabinovitz, who was pen pal.
Santo had that also.
Yeah, and it's a slow movement towards your body just breaking down, and like Jackie. I mean, at 37. He, not only old age, but diabetes really. I mean, his hair was white. You literally age, and his whole body was just racked by diabetes. He didn't have the kind of insulin.
Well, he probably didn't take care of himself very well. And I'm sure that the stress of, going through what he went through when he came up for those 2 years added a lot to it.
Oh yeah, it certainly did.
Yeah, just like I feel also that we'll get into that next week, but I feel the stress of 1961 helped the fact that he was a chain smoker led to Roger Maris's early demise.
Yeah. His hair was falling out during that run when he was going to break Babe Ruth's record.
Yeah, and the other one I want to mention who was in his last season was Phil Rizzuto.
Yeah.
Rizzuto was in a steady decline. He hit one under 200 in 1954, playing in over 100 games. And by 1955, he became a bench warmer. And then in 1956, in September, the Yankees were looking, late August, the Yankees were looking to bring, Slaughter back from the A's. And they called Rizzuto into a meeting, George Weiss and Casey Stengel, and supposedly asked Rizzuto on who they should cut to make room for Slaughter. So Rizzuto suggested certain players that were getting very little playing time, weren't contributing much, and they would give him an excuse why they couldn't cut this particular guy. And then it finally dawned on Rizzuto that he was the one.
Yeah,
he was 30, just short of 39 at the time, and he had it. And instead of going losing his temper and going crazy, he took his wife and they went upstate for a while. They came back, and he didn't make any criticism of Stengel or Weiss. And, of course, they offered him the job in the broadcast booth, where he would do that for over 30 years and turn out to be a legend.
40 years, actually.
He was there for forever,
he was.
I remember him with the Money Store. I used to the WPIX games. But one thing about Rizzuto, he was in decline in 55. But something? He never forgave Stengel for doing it the way that he did it, to call him into the office.
Well, he hated Stengel because when he wanted to try out for the Dodgers and Stengel was managing them. Back in the 30s, he told Rizzuto to get too small, go get a shoeshine kick.
Yeah.
Stengel wasn't politically correct by any means.
No. Well, Stengel, he was a product of his times.
Yeah.
He said about Howard and said, "I finally get one. I got one that can't run."
Yeah.
Yeah. He just inserted an N word in there. So.
Yeah, but he played him. If they had others that he felt could have contributed to the team, he would have played them also. Yeah. He didn't like Harry Simpson when they got him, which we'll get into in a few minutes when we discuss 1957, because Harry Simpson was acquired in the trade for Billy Martin. So they didn't play him, and Simpson wound up going back to the A's.
And I think Jackie Robinson had a problem with Casey as well. He thought Casey was racist.
Well, a lot of them, the managers, the old school managers from that era, were not exactly enlightened. Yeah, the worst, of course, during the 50s was Pinky Higgins, who managed the Red Sox for most of that decade. So anyway, we got to the 1956 World Series, and the Yankees and Dodgers again. This is for the fourth time in 5 years, and the seventh time since 1941. And the Dodgers, it was basically a reversal of the 1955 series. The Dodgers won the first two games in Yankee Stadium. Ebbets Field, sorry. And in the second game, the Yankees got off to a 6-0 lead when Yogi Berra hit a grand slam home run off Newcomb, and they blew it. The pitcher who blew the lead in that second game was none other than Don Larson. Then the scene shifted back to Yankee Stadium. They started Whitey Ford in the third game, and he was losing for a good portion of the game. And Enos Slaughter, who was 40 years old at the time, hit a 3-run home run in the seventh inning, and the Yankees wound up winning that game. That would be the first of 5 straight complete games that the Yankees would have in that World Series. The fourth game was won by Tom Sturdivant, who was a 16-game winner, and he beat the Dodgers 6-2. And the fifth game, which is legendary, was the Don Larson perfect game. Don Larson beat Sal Magli 2-0. Babe Pinelli, who was the home plate umpire, retired after that season, and that game was the last game he umpired at home plate. Larson threw 97 pitches. He only had 1 3-ball count. That was the Pee Wee Reese in the first inning. And the Yankees got 2 runs, one on a Mickey Mantle home run and the other on a couple of singles. Mackley only gave up 5 hits. And Larson struck out Dale Mitchell for the last out of the game in the 9th inning. And Larson has been lionized for that ever since, even though he wound up with an 81 and 91 career record. Included in that was a 3-21 season with the 1954 Orioles and a 1-10 season with the 1959 Yankees. And Larson was shipped to Kansas City after 1959 in the trade that brought Roger Maris to the Yankees. But between Ford, Sturdivant, Larson, Turley in Game 6, which he lost 1-0 in 10 innings to Clem Labine, and the Johnny Cooks in the last game, they had 5 straight complete games in the World Series. The Dodgers won the 6th game 1-0 in 10 innings in Ebbets Field. Jackie Robinson got his last hit. He drove in the winning run in the 10th inning, a fly ball to left field, which Slaughter misjudged. And in the 7th game, the Dodgers pounded out Newcomb again. Yankees beat the Dodgers 9-0. Yogi Berra hit 2 home runs off Newcomb in the first 3 innings, both with a man on. And Elson Howard hit a home run, and Bill Skowron hit a grand slam home run to ice the game. And Yogi Berra in that series hit 360 with 3 home runs and 10 RBIs. And I thought he should have been given the MVP despite Larson's perfect game. But the perfect game has taken on a life of its own.
Yeah, if you've seen replays of it, and I know all of us have several times, they called third strike to Mitchell, which was Pinella, the Babe's coda as an umpire.
Yeah. As a home plate umpire, yeah.
Yeah, home plate umpire looked pretty. It looked high and outside. It was really a questionable call, but under the circumstances, I don't think anybody blamed him for making the call. And Mitchell should have been up there, should have sensed it was coming, and should have been swinging. And there have been a number of near perfectos since that have been denied by with 2 out and a 3-2 count by an umpire who was called ball 4 in a very close pitch.
Milt Pappas
was. Milt Pappas is probably the leading, candidate for, I was robbed.
Yeah, Milt Pappas made an appearance at the 1987 Sabre Convention in Washington, and he spent his whole time talking about that call. He wouldn't discuss anything else except how he was robbed by Bruce Fleming of a perfect game there. Even though he did wind up getting a no-hitter. but Larson has become a celebrity. His baseball cards are worth more than the average player at that point because of the perfect game. And when I was at the Yankee Stadium in 1999 for Yogi Berra Day, when Yogi returned to the Yankee Stadium for the first time in 14 years, and Larson threw out the first ball to Berra. They were both in their 70s at that point, and David Cone pitched the perfect game that day against the Montreal Expos.
Yeah.
And a story when I was in junior high school when Larson pitched the perfect game, and the scuttlebutt came as we were leaving that Larson had a perfect game going. So there was a guy waiting in his car listening to the game on the radio, waiting to pick up his kid. So a bunch of us stuck our heads into the car, and we wouldn't let him go until the game ended. It didn't take that long, and he was very good about it. Yeah. So none of us, because there hadn't been a perfect game pitched in the major leagues in any circumstance since 1922 by an obscure pitcher named Charlie Robertson for the White Sox. It was, it was something that at that point was very, very special. But the Yankees got revenge for 1955, and I got back all the dimes and quarters I had lost the year before.
And you still have them?
No, possibly. I wish I had all the baseball cards from those years.
Yeah.
Which I wasn't allowed to keep because those sets are worth a nice, pretty penny these days.
Yeah, they are.
And so they got to 1957, and 1957 turned out to be a terrible year in New York because it became fairly evident early in the season that the Dodgers and Giants were on their last licks in New York City. The Giants were ticketed to move to Minneapolis. They had built a new ballpark there, which would eventually become the first park that the Minnesota Twins would play in. And they were supposed to move to Minneapolis. It was built for the Giants. And then later in the summer when the Dodgers, O'Malley decided to pick up stakes and move the Dodgers to Los Angeles, he convinced Horace Stoneham to go with them out to the coast. So teams coming from the East and Midwest would be able to stay out there for a week rather than come out for one series. And he dragged Stoneham out to San Francisco. And of course, a couple of years after that, the Giants would move into Candlestick Park, which would be a disaster for their entire tenure in that place.
And Al, I just had a show on Monday with Robert Garrett. He just wrote a new book, Home Team, The Turbulent Story of the San Francisco Giants. And we didn't even get past 1960. And all we spoke about was that Horace Stoneham doesn't get enough credit, whereas O'Malley is pretty much in the spotlight here. But Stoneham was also a visionary. And, he knew that the Polo Grounds just could not be a place for the Giants anymore. The neighborhoods were turning bad. People were migrating out of Manhattan. And his only source of revenue were Giant games. And the attendance was way down. Even before Bobby Thompson's home run, even before the 54 series. And to make things worse, the New York football Giants decided to lease with Yankee Stadium.
Yeah, they went to Yankee Stadium in 1956.
Yeah. And it made it worse, And Stoneham saw, first he wanted to go to Minnesota because, again, he saw what happened with the move from Philadelphia to Kansas City. And he saw that profits could be made out there. But, when he contacted O'Malley's like, speak to the mayor of San Francisco, and he was shown around the town, he got the idea to move. Now, the agreement that was made on May 28th, 1957 was both of these teams got to move. to California. If one backs out, the deal is done because there would only be one team in California, and it would be hard for the rest of the National League to go out there and play. If not,
So the American League did that for between the time the Angels were formed until the A's moved out there in 1968. The American League had one team in California for 7 seasons.
The Los Angeles Anaheim Angels or California.
Whatever. They've got some more name changes than
then they changed.
Zsa Zsa Gabor, who got married about 8 times.
But this was groundbreaking, and he trusted a builder, and Candlestick was supposed to be put up in '59, but they played in the Seal Stadium, which only held about 24,000 people.
It was a small ball venue, but if they could have expanded Seal Stadium.
Yeah, there was a book that came out a number of years ago about the Giants' first year, and they interviewed almost every player, including Willie Mays. And to a man, they said they should have double-decked Seal Stadium rather than go out to Candlestick.
Absolutely. It could have been done. It would have cost less money, and and I don't know if they still be playing there, but I think it would have the Giants' fortunes for the next 20 years or so would have been very different.
And they broke attendance records there. They actually beat their old Polo Ground records with a stadium more than half the size than they had in New York.
Well, one of the things that happened, though, I'd like you guys' opinion on this before we get into the 1957 season. The Giants, basically, in 1957, their last year in New York, had 2 assets. They had Willie Mays and Johnny Antonelli. They go out to San Francisco, and all of a sudden they bring up Cepeda and Jim Davenport and Leon Wagner and Felipe Alou and the catcher Bob Schmidt, and they turned themselves into a contender.
Willie McCovey.
Yeah, it was the most amazing influx of rookies in the 50s and one
because McCovey didn't come up till 1959. But the thing is that I think either of you think that the Giants kept these guys down in the minors during 1957 because they wanted a lousy team in New York and wanted to bring these guys in as a fresh start in San Francisco.
It's a thought, but it's one I've never heard before, and
I've speculated on this for a while.
I'd have to look at what these guys did in their minor league season in '57. Yeah, I don't know.
Robert Garrett, I asked him that question, Dave, and he said they wanted to turn this New York club into a San Francisco club. And by bringing up these guys, they were no longer the New York Giants. They still touted Willie Mays, but in the public's opinion, Willie Mays was still in New York.
Yeah, he was not. He was not one we received there initially.
No, he was. And so when you brought up Cepeda, and even with the building of San Francisco's Candlestick Park, Stoneham had the idea, look, I'm worried about a parking lot. San Francisco's not like New York where you could just take a train and get off on the Polo Grounds. He wanted a community right in the heart of San Francisco. The problem is he got the mistake by the bay over there. And, you know what happened in the 61 All-Star game. And, they blew Stu Miller off, and they would just have horrible problems. Even the building of Candlestick Park became a pain in the neck because the builder was slow to move and things were not going as well as it could. And so they were forced, the Giants, to play in Seal Stadium for another season. But you're absolutely right. They held a lot of these guys down in the minors so that when they did come up, you're making the team a more West Coast team now, not a New York team.
Because the mainstays that they had in the 50s, like Alvin Dark and Whitey Lockman and Don Mueller, Monty Irvin, all of them were gone at that point. And
I don't know. I still tend to doubt that they kept them down there deliberately with that in mind.
No, it's a speculative.
It is.
I'm not saying that this. I Can't say it was the definite, but to me, it had the appearance. And what's interesting also is that when they finished up in '57, they had Lockman and Thompson on the roster, and they unloaded both of them before they moved out to San Francisco.
Yeah.
Lockman, they had gotten Lockman back, and after he was sent to the Cardinals in the Doc Cheney's trade in 1956, and they had gotten Thompson back, which we'll get into in a minute, when they from Milwaukee when they shipped Red Cheney's over there, and both of them were gone before 1958.
Lockman was with him in '58. Yeah, he was with him in '58.
Well, he didn't play very much. He was released earlier, I believe, in that season. But sold to with the Reds and the Orioles for very short tenures. But Thompson was traded to the Cubs.
Yeah.
And, Doc had been, Mueller had been sold to the White Sox in '56, and Doc had been traded to the Cardinals in 1956. So basically, and Irvin spent 1956 with the Cubs his last year in the majors. And so anyway, we get into the 1957 race, and the Yankees, again, won the American League pennant. Mantle had not didn't have the kind of year he had in 1956, but he hit 365, and they won fairly easy. Tom Stuyvesant was the big pitcher. Whitey Ford had a sore arm for a good portion of the season and only won 11 games, but they won handily. The White Sox was second, and the Indians, as David mentioned earlier, all got old. And after Gil McDougald hit Herb Score in the Iowa line drive in May of that year, that really took the starch out of them. But also, believe it or not, any interview I had seen with McDougald, read about McDougald, he said he was never the same after that incident because he had hit 311 in 1956 and was on a tear in 1957 when that happened. And McDougald had always said that the heart of the game went out of him after that incident.
Yeah, it was brutal. You know, I've seen. I wasn't there. I didn't see it.
I heard it on the radio because they weren't televising road games.
Yeah, they weren't. You know, and I didn't see it I wasn't televising Cleveland. I don't think either. But I have seen replays of it, and wow, it was scary. It was his fifth start of the season. He was on his way to another, in all probability, another 20-win season, and the heart really went out of the tribe after that. All their pitchers had bad years. Their hitters weren't much, and they fell below 500 for the first time since 1946. And they weren't. They were well out of contention, and except for a flurry in '59 when they got back into contention, it will be a long, long time for Cleveland fans before they had a perennial contender again.
I'll get into the curse of Rocky Colavito next week. Yeah. But two of the performances that season were the home run and RBI titles won by Roy Sievers of the Washington Senators, who was a very, very good power hitter for them for a number of years. Roy just passed away at the age of 90 a few weeks ago, and he was one of the few remaining St. Louis Browns. The other thing was 39-year-old outfielder for the Boston Red Sox by the name of Theodore Samuel Williams hit 388 at age 39. Now, if he could run a little bit, he would have hit 400 again.
Ted Williams.
Yeah. That's right. That's incredible.
Up and up.
Incredible for somebody that old to hit like that. And, his on base was incredible. He had a .731 slugging percentage. And they beat Mickey Mantle out for the slugging title that year by a good margin. For somebody that age to hit like that was just absolutely remarkable. And his compadre in the National League, Stanley Musial, hit 351 and won his last National League batting title at the age of 36. Musial wouldn't hit 37 until November of that year. and that was the last time that the two of them only won batting titles in the same year one other time. That was in 1948. It was just the two of them won the same year. So that was the second time, and it was just really a throwback to a decade earlier, having those two win the batting titles. In the National League, the Braves finally broke through, and what made the Braves was that they made a little trade with the Giants at the deadline, where they got Red Shaney's to fill the hole at second base, and they gave up Bobby Thompson, who was basically near the end. Danny O'Connell, who was a second baseman they had acquired from Pittsburgh after 1953 and had gone steadily downhill, and a pitcher by the name of Ray Crone. Shaney solidified the Braves team and became a fourth Hall of Famer, along with Eddie Matthews, Warren Spahn, and Henry Aaron. Henry Aaron would win the home run and batting titles in the National League that year at the ripe old age of 23. And they won. They beat the Cardinals, who contended for the first time since 1949. They beat them out by 8 games. And the Dodgers, without Jackie Robinson and with all of the boys of summer getting old, would come in a bad third. Johnny Padres, the hero of the World Series, came back after spending a year in the Navy in 1956. And Don Newcomb would fall off from 27-7 to 11-12. And the only boys of summer that really did perform up to anywhere near their custom levels were Duke Snider, Gil Hodges, and Carl Furillo. But they were all getting up in years, and none of them would really produce out in Los Angeles. And the Dodgers, in the last home game, drew about 6,000. And people still, in this day in Brooklyn, still haven't gotten over it. There's a friend of mine named Bob Gruber in Sabre, who was known because he was an advisor on the movie that was done on Hank Greenberg by Aviva Kempner, and Bob, HBO in 2008 ran a program on the Dodgers. They had a number of the ones like Clem Labine and Duke Snider, who was still around at the time, participated, and he called me up, and I said, Bob, they've been gone for 50 years, so they're not coming back. Get over it. But there are a lot of people, and the people who were Dodgers and Giant fans here most of them could never bring themselves to root for the Yankees.
No. And
they really didn't follow it or care about it until the Mets were formed.
My uncle said there was no baseball in New York, according to him, from 57 through 62.
And the Yankees, believe it or not, did not get a tremendous upsurge in attendance because of being the only game in town. In 1961, which we'll get into next week, they drew like 1,750,000, even with the whole Mantle Maris chase on Babe Ruth coming into play. The National League fans would never, could never bring themselves. And Jimmy Breslin addresses this in his book, Can Anybody Here Play This Game? That the National League fans could never bring themselves to root for the Yankees, because the Yankees would have hated, United States Steel for, all those times, because they usually beat them in these teams in the World Series.
Yet both of these teams left because of poor attendance. So,
yeah, well,
and
there a lot of the old ballparks, what they call the classic ballparks, were built in within the confines of city streets, mostly downtown, and a lot of those neighborhoods were turning bad. I don't know if either of you ever saw games in Connie Mack Stadium in Philadelphia.
No.
But that area turned into a really, really rough area. And going to Phillies games in the late 50s and early 60s was no bargain. I knew a guy from there who I went to college with who used to go to a lot of games. He used to pay kids to watch his car so the tires wouldn't get slashed.
Sounds like my neighborhood I grew up in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Old Comiskey Park had that problem, too.
And the Bridge Stadium, Tiger Stadium, not exactly in a gray area, a lot of them. So, and the capacities were relatively small, and basically the best thing about them, of course, was that they were all different. They had their own quirks, and which was one of the problems when they built all the the multi-purpose ones, which we'll get into at some point. So Yankees played the Braves in the 1957 World Series. And the Braves have been the only one of the National League original 8 that the Yankees hadn't played or beaten. So Milwaukee was going nuts. They drew over 2 million that year. That was the peak of the Braves' stay in Milwaukee. And the series opened in Yankee Stadium. They split the first 2 games. The Yankees Ford beat Spawn in Game 1, and Lou Burdette, who would have the series of his life, or almost anybody's life, won Game 2, beating Bobby Shantz. They went to Milwaukee, and the third game, Tony Kubek, who was a Milwaukee native, rookie with the Yankees that season, hit 2 home runs in Game 3, and the Yankees won that fairly easily, 12-3. In Game 4, Orange Spawn was beating the Yankees 4-1 going to the top of the 9th inning. Elson Howard hit a 3-run home run to tie the game up. Game went into extra innings. The Yankees scored a run in the 10th. And there was a shoe polish incident in the bottom of the 10th where a Braves reserve named Nippy Jones, who hardly ever played, was sent up to pinch hit, and he was hit on the foot by a pitch.
Claimed he was hit on
the foot in a shoe polish incident, which was duplicated in the 1969 World Series. And he was awarded first base. And
after the ball was examined,
after the ball was examined,
and they did see a little black spot on it.
Yeah,
almost minuscule.
And there was an error made, and then Eddie Matthews got up and hit a 3-run home run for Bob Grimm to win the game for the Braves 7-5 to even the series at 2-2. In the 5th game, the Braves got a run in the 5th inning on an infield hit, which Jerry Coleman, who was playing second base for the Yankees, didn't charge. He let the ball play him. And I think it was Joe Adcock was safe at first, and Matthews scored the only run, and Lou Burdette beat Whitey Ford 1-0. They came back to Yankee Stadium, and Bobby Shantz beat Warren Spahn in Game 6 to send the game to a 7th game. And the Braves started Lou Burdette on 2 days rest. And I'm sorry, it wasn't Bobby Shantz. I think it was Bob Turley had won that game. Excuse me, yeah. And Lou Burdette shut the Yankees out 5-0 on 2 days rest. And Kubek made an error on a double play ball. In the 3rd inning, the Braves wound up scoring 5 runs in the 3rd inning, and they shut the Yankees out 5-0. And Milwaukee went totally wild. And it was essentially the end of the
Milwaukee franchise in any major league had won, and they had been They had been a member of the National League as far back as 1878. They'd been in the American Association, which was a major league in the 1880s and early 90s. In 1891, they'd been in the Union Association in 1884, and they'd been in the American League. They were one of the original 8 American League teams, so they'd been around. They'd had their share of major league franchises, and they inherited the Boston Braves, and for the first time, Milwaukee fans could celebrate.
And don't forget, Milwaukee was 4 years in the Braves.
That was the fifth season.
That was the fifth season.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a little bit about Lou Burdett. Who did he come up with?
The Yankees. He was sent there with the Johnny Saint trade.
He was there.
Burdett.
And prior to Game 7, as you mentioned, Al, the Milwaukee press, and a lot of people don't know about this. They were like Dave mentioned, they were in a frenzy. The press,
yeah.
The press, I think, was just as on the ball as the New York press. And they asked Lou. They said, "What do you think about pitching on 2 days rest into the 7th game?" And you know what he replied? He said, "I'll be all right. 1953, I once relieved in 16 games out of 22. I'm bigger, stronger, and dumber now."
Yeah, he Lawrence Spahn, Johnny Logan, and Eddie Matthews had all been veterans of the last year in Boston, where they drew 281,000.
I mean, you can't say enough about Burdett. I mean, he shut out the Yankees twice, which basically tied the record from.
Yeah, he only gave up 2 runs in the first game, in Game 2, so he gave up 2 runs in 27 innings.
Yeah, I think his performance in the '57 series is still the most remarkable pitching performance in all of World Series history.
In fact, my friend Tom Zacco had put up in a Facebook site called Say What. He put up pictures of Lou Burdett in a Yankee uniform and a uniform of the Kansas City Blues, where he was pitching before he was traded to the Braves. And I had never seen either of those before.
No, I haven't either.
And just one last thing, 54, because we got into the 55 season. 54 was the last season of the Women's League. That was it ran from 43 to 54, and that was that. But
also the 50s signaled basically the demise of the Negro Leagues.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a few left,
yeah.
And I think, in 56, I think Satch signed on with the Birmingham Barons. He was 50 years old.
Yeah, he was with the Miami Marlins of the International League.
Yeah.
At that point,
and
because Beck was running that team down there.
Yeah.
And 57 was pretty much spelled the end of the Pacific Coast League as people had known it for over 50 years. Once Los Angeles and San Francisco moved out there, taking away the franchises in L.A. and San Francisco.
Yeah, plus the Hollywood Stars and the Oakland Oaks.
The league was never the same, and it's even though it's still called the Pacific Coast League, it really hasn't been the Pacific Coast League for quite a while.
Just because Memphis and New Orleans and Nashville and Omaha and Des Moines are in the Pacific Coast League.
Yeah, you can't explain that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's like the Atlantic Coast League, the Atlantic Coast Conference in college, where Pittsburgh, Syracuse, Louisville, all these places where they're really on the Atlantic Coast have teams in there. Yeah, but in fact, there's a Pacific Coast League Historical Society, which I've been a member for quite a number of years, run by Dick Beveridge. That 57 is the end of the Coast League, as they know it. They're right, and they don't consider the Pacific Coast League existing after 1957.
Yeah,
there they used to play these incredibly long schedules. And the way they worked it was teams would go on, up to a place for a week. Monday would be a travel day. They'd play, 7 games. They'd play a doubleheader on Sunday. and they would stay in Portland or Seattle or wherever for a week.
It was a great life for a ball player to be in the Pacific Coast.
Yeah, in fact, a lot of Pacific Coast League players didn't want to come to the major leagues because they were getting paid more, and the life was easier.
Yep.
I read an interview with Ferris Fain, who went from the San Francisco Seals to the A's, and he had to take a cut.
Yeah. Yeah, the 46 Seals, which was his last minor league team, paid very well.
Yeah,
They were priding themselves in paying major league salaries.
Brent Kelly did an excellent book on which I read about a year ago, the oral history of the Seals from 1946 through 1957. And some guys that I only knew barely from their Topps cards had substantial chapters in there, and the book was very, very well done. But the standard text for the history of the Coast League is by Dennis Snelling, called The Great Minor League. It's about it's a history of the Coast League from 1903 through 1957, and to me, it's the standard on that league, and I recommend it to anybody who is interested in that. Okay, gentlemen. Any last words?
I remember the 1957 World Series very well, and I really was. Being from Cleveland, of course, I never was a Yankees lover, and seeing them lose in '55 to the Dodgers, and then again in '57, the Braves made up for the heartbreaks in Cleveland, especially the score heartbreak in '57. And we'll get into 58 and
58, 59, and 60 next time, because 60 is basically the end of the 8-team leagues. Yeah. And the end of the Casey Stengel era, and there's a lot to.
The end of a lot of things.
Yeah. So I think the next time that will be a very good cutoff.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, I want to thank you. I think this has been an excellent session. I hope whoever has listened to this will get something out of it, and hopefully everything will go fine for next week. Same bat time, same bat channel.
Thank you both.
Yeah, tomorrow's my birthday.
Hey, happy birthday!
I know, Ralph. I'm very upset that Ralph put that picture up on Facebook because it's premature.
Is it a baby picture?
No, it's my profile picture. But I hit 74 tomorrow.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Hey, and I'm backwards on Sunday. I turned 47.
Yeah, I'm 4 days younger. Tommy John had his birthday the other day, and I put down, a couple of people posted on it, I put down he's 4 days older than I am.
Yeah.
As far as I know, he's the closest player that I was born, to.
Well, also, I started a new baseball site for women. I put you in, Al.
Okay.
Hey, do you want to go into the site as well? You got Maybelle Blair. You got all the people from the AAPGL, Carol Sheldon and Isla Borders, who was the first woman to pitch in a professional man's league 20 years ago. She was on my show yesterday. She's in there. I can put you in there every day. I post something new on the women.
Okay. All right, gentlemen. Thank you. Same bat time, same bat channel next week, hopefully.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.